Hello and welcome to this special report which comes to you from the Radicalization Awareness Network. I'm Haja Yacoubi. This program is the third in a series which explores topical issues of relevance to practitioners across the European Union. Today's program comes to you from Brussels, where we're going to take an in-depth look at the evolving lone actor terror threat and ask if recent attacks in Norway and the UK point to a worrying new trend. We'll be asking the REN Victims of Terrorism Working Group lead if the pandemic has exacerbated this threat and what, if anything, practitioners should or could be doing about it. In the recent attack in Leigh-on-Sea in the UK, where a member of parliament was killed in his constituency office, very little is yet publicly known about the attacker, his beliefs, his ideology or his motivations. What is known is that the individual was previously enrolled in exit and counter-radicalization programs. Earlier I spoke to Paul Gill, a professor and researcher at University College London, who specializes in the area of terrorism and lone actor attacks.
In the aftermath of many of these acts of public mass violence, we're left with questions of what is it that motivated this individual? Were they just habitually violent individuals and this is the latest outbreak of their violence? Is it down to their mental health problems? Is it down to the ideological texts that they may have accessed online? Is it down to some sort of personal grievance and stressor that they're having in their life? Is it some level of conspiracy thinking and ideation? Is it an act of public suicide? In very many cases, there's probably going to be evidence suggestive that some of these influences are at play simultaneously. And it's very difficult to know what was the sort of tipping point, what was the one true motivation that got them to do it that day. We need to sort of think about prevention from a public health perspective. We need to understand which of these risk factors have a common functional link to the outcome and harmful behaviour that we're interested in stopping. And if we can target those types of underlying predisposing, precipitating factors with more general preventative efforts, it should decrease the potential pool of people who are likely to step over the line into violence.
Let us turn to the next segment, because for the very topical issue of dis, mis and malinformation and the impact the digital environment is having to help radicalize or motivate lone actors. Earlier I spoke to Catherine Torlifson, who recently wrote a REN practitioners paper on this very subject. Let's hear more about her work and the papers she's published.
Where you see how these subculture styles of communication online and how these really effective structures of emotional community building, masculinity and meaning making online really is more important than actual physical organizations or the rules and hierarchies of a particular organization in a particular place. They have a sense of agency by being connected through a so-called white power international movement that is leaderless, it's transnational and it's anonymous.
Catherine, thank you so much for joining us and welcome here in the session.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, in your REN paper, you wrote about the post-organizational reality around these people. Can you explain a little bit what this means?
Well, it means that subcultures online can be equally important in inspiring terrorism and political violence as organizations in the physical world. But of course there are offline drivers as well, but it means that young digital natives growing up these days, they socialize, they radicalize online primarily.
I'm also curious, Catherine, just to visualize this, if we talk about, these online almost incubator spaces like 4chan and Telegram, where people are coming together, what does that look like?
It's really a digital home where lots of young, particularly men, they spend lots of time in different sub-forums where you do develop friendship, is a space for meaning making, belonging, entertainment, and also where you can explore its identity and masculinity. So it is a place of online community formation primarily. But it's also a place increasingly for this global co-production of fascist content.
And when we talk about, these digital spaces where a lot of young people find themselves, obviously the lack of content moderation on platforms like Telegram and anonymity on 4chan makes it almost impossible to intervene when, extremist ideas are being shared. Have you found any effective ways to intervene nonetheless?
I think the most important CVE advice would be to build democratic resilience offline, because we are living in a digital era and we're all digital citizens, and because some of these spaces are beyond law, beyond the nation state, it's important to equip young citizens and also older with the digital literacy skills and also critical literacy to really identify conspiracy narratives, identify dehumanizing hatred, and also calls for violence.
You also wrote in the report, right, about the importance of gamification and memes to this culture. Could you give some examples, maybe specific examples of just how widespread this is?
Well, that is the language. It's a very visual culture that's important to processes of belonging and radicalization and propaganda circulation. So one example would be, for instance, an obvious meme is the Pepper the Frog or the anti-Semitic Happy Merchant meme, which is being used in processes of imitation. The lone actor terrorist attacks I'm writing about in the report that occurred in 2019, they were inspired by this subculture, but the perpetrators also added their own elements inspired by mimetic culture, which is all about imitating past mass casualties and atrocities.
I mean, it can be such an obscure, online incubator space where everything is happening. How challenging is it then for practitioners to really operate in these spaces?
It is really challenging for frontline practitioners because this is a rapidly changing space. There's lots of research being done into digital subcultures at the moment, and what we're starting to know is that the affective structures online can be more important than ideology. And we also know that the online communities need to be approached as, in a way, real-life communities as well. So there's lots of research being done to how lone actors struggle to embed themselves in group contexts, and that lone actors are all represented when it comes to mental illness diagnosis, for instance. So it means that we need to approach this field both looking at ideology that is gamified and follows these emotional structures, and also includes public mental health aspects in this in PVE and CVE programming.
I can imagine that there are a lot of practitioners who are watching this and who are also wondering, what sort of headline recommendations would you make to practitioners going into the new year of things that they can really do to make a difference?
We recommend in the report, for instance, to have young male practitioners who are fluent in this digital culture, in the gaming culture, to work with their peers basically in detecting this, because there is a generational gap, both in terms of digital literacy and in terms of the visual symbols that are being used. And I think also really important the role of masculinity and aggrieved masculinity and a heroic masculinity in these spaces. So really looking at how these processes are intensely gendered and also use a gender perspective in PVE and CVE programming.
Catherine Thorleifsen, thank you for joining us today and thank you for sharing those insights.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, the devastation left behind by these attacks and the seeming randomness of them make their impact on communities all the more profound. Let's remind ourselves of this impact.
My youngest daughter, Synne, 18 years old, was on a summer camp at Utøya. And on the Friday, the 22nd, there was this terrorist who came to the island and massacred 69 young people. One of them was my daughter. We're not just, victims. We are also people, living people who have our experience both before the terror attack and afterwards. So making use of that experience is really important.
Joining me to discuss this devastating impact is Philippe van Steenkiste, RAN Practitioners Lead for the Victims of Terrorism Working Group. Philippe's working group works very closely with the topic of lone actors, helping to rebuild the families and communities left behind by these attacks. Philippe, welcome, and can I just start off by saying thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much.
So your working group is very much focused on building and increasing resilience in those communities and in the entire aftermath of the incidents that take place there. How does RAN actually support practitioners and local communities in this area? Do you have any examples for us?
My sister died during the Brussels attacks of 22nd of March 2016. In the very beginning, we felt a little bit lost. And then through RAN, we came into a network and we realized what was already existing around us. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have to learn from each other. We learned a lot in Belgium in the last 5-6 years. France learned a lot. Spain learned a lot. Other countries are learning a lot. So that's where we try to share this know-how, this knowledge, and also support each other.
Do you, also from the perspective of the working group, do you think that there is a role that they can contribute in preventing terrorism? And if so, what does that specifically look like?
I think preventing terrorism is a role that belongs to many actors. We have to collaborate together, we have to cooperate together, we have to work together. But of course the victims can play a key role, and we have experienced this. We talked with people who were on the path of radicalization in prisons in France or in Belgium. And we saw that when we talk about the resilience, when we bring this humanity and we show them that we are not affected in our humanity, it opens somewhere. And that's already part of the job, just opening a little bit this tunnel vision. And then, of course, it's with all the actors, the psychologists, social workers, etc., that we can try to minimize the radicalization.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Philippe van Steenkiste, thank you for sharing all these insights and stories with us, because I think they're very important and should be heard in that respect. One thing that's apparent is the sheer complexity of this issue, with many of these attackers already known to authorities or part of rehabilitation initiatives or programs. To help understand more about how practitioners develop and deliver rehabilitation activities, I spoke to Ian Dernescu, who leads the RAN Practitioners Rehab Working Group. Thank you so much, Ian, for joining us. And Ian, I see that you are all in the dark in a power outage. I would say that is some dedication to be here with us today, so thank you for that.
You are welcome. It's true that we have an unexpected power cut, as they tend to be. I'm sorry for that, but I hope that this will not affect the quality of our conversation.
Definitely not. I want to start off with this first question. To what extent should we be surprised by the fact that attackers have been enrolled in programs but have still gone on to commit violent attacks?
Well, it is true that research shows that most of them were involved in some kind of rehabilitation programs, not necessarily de-radicalization programs, but rather ordinary rehabilitation programs dedicated to, let's say, ordinary offenders. This nexus crime, terrorism, was studied quite intensively in the latest years, and we started to shed some light on this connection, but of course there is still more to learn from this.
And when we talk about, the specific case of lone actors, are there any particular challenges that are very specific to rehabilitating lone actors as opposed to other extremist or terrorist group members, for that matter?
Well, I think that in general, the rehabilitation strategies should be more or less the same for all terrorists, not necessarily for lone actors. What we know already is that they have a different trajectory to get here, to commit the attacks. So we can almost always find some kind of injustice and grievances that are actually motivating these people. We can also look at issues around military subcultures. They become very interested in military or paramilitary activities. So we can see already some patterns that we can target, either to contribute to early identification or to preventing them to act. Another interesting trend is that most of them are more interested in high-velocity arms, guns, weaponry, and they are not so much interested in bombs anymore. So maybe we can also look at that route to see how we can control access to this high-velocity weaponry. We have to be really clear that a mathematical prediction of this phenomenon is not possible, and I don't think it will be possible in the future either, because human prediction is imperfect. So we cannot be sure 100%.
Also, given the vulnerability of the individuals, does thinking of the lone actor threat as a public health issue, as Paul previously called it, do you think that that would potentially provide a more useful framework in dealing with this for practitioners?
Well, it seems that about 40% of lone actors are affected by mental health issues. So from this perspective, we can say that mental health is an issue that we need to look at and see how we can deal with in a more effective way, using the community and the society resources to treat these issues.
Ian, if we talk about the challenges that we currently face, I think one thing that cannot not be mentioned is the COVID-19 crisis. How has this affected really the rehabilitation in the current environment for practitioners? Are there new challenges?
I have to say that COVID poses some issues, not only regarding rehabilitation, but also regarding the whole phenomenon of radicalization and terrorism, because we can see new faces of the phenomenon. We can see quite a lot of interactions between different forms of terrorism activities, conspiracy theories, anti-vax theories, all these kind of things coming together in a very strange and surprising way sometimes.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much to Ian Dernescu for all your time and being here with us by candlelight during a power outage again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, that's it for this special report. Please do go to the RAND Practitioners website, where you can access papers and read the latest research and thinking on this and many other topics. This program has come to you from the Radicalization Awareness Network. Until next time, goodbye.